When a woman and her silent nephew appeared at Nathaniel Bridger's isolated Montana ranch in 1885, he thought he was offering shelter to victims of bad luck. He had no idea he was about to uncover a trafficking network that had been operating in plain sight for years, or that his dead wife had died trying to expose it. What started as a simple act of kindness became a fight against a monster who controlled an entire town through money, fear, and a carefully crafted lie. And it all came down to three words from a boy who hadn't spoken in 3 years. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story of courage and justice travels. And if this grabs you, hit that like button and subscribe because you won't believe where this goes. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end. He killed her, I saw. Mute Boy's first words exposed the monster who destroyed his mother. The bruise on Iris Whitmore's throat looked like a necklace made of shadows. Nathaniel Bridger noticed it the moment she stepped onto his porch that September morning, though she'd tried to hide it beneath a faded gray scarf. The fabric had slipped when she bent to adjust the small boy's collar, and there it was, 4 distinct finger marks on the left side, a thumbprint on the right, dark purple, fading to sickly yellow at the edges. The kind of bruise that came from someone's hand wrapped around a windpipe, squeezing until the world went dark. Nate said nothing, just stood in his doorway with his coffee growing cold, watching this woman who couldn't have been more than 28 try to compose herself while the child beside her stared at the ground with the intensity of someone memorizing every crack in the wooden planks. "I can cook," Iris said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clean, mend, whatever you need. My nephew Danny and I, we just need work. A place to stay. We won't be any trouble." The boy Danny didn't look up, didn't speak. His small hand gripped his aunt's skirt like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world, and his face held the careful blankness Nate had seen before on men coming back from bad places. The kind of blankness that meant you'd learn to disappear inside yourself because the outside world had become too dangerous to inhabit. Nate should have said no, should have sent them on their way with some pins and directions to the next ranch. He'd spent 4 years building a life of deliberate solitude here at Thunder Creek Ranch, choosing silence and work over human connection, existing in the space between dawn and dusk, without having to think about the hole Catherine's death had carved into his chest. 4 years since they'd pulled her body from the river, waterlogged and broken, and told him it was an accident. A tragic accident. Her horse had thrown her near the water, they said. She'd hit her head, fallen in, drowned before anyone could reach her. These things happen. Except Catherine had been the best rider in Flathead Valley. Except she never went near the river alone, knowing how the current ran swift and deadly in spring. Except the night before she died, she told Nate she'd discovered something about the missing women, about who was behind it, about powerful people doing terrible things in the dark. The next day she was dead. Nate had tried to investigate, had gone to Sheriff Morrison with his suspicions, his questions, his evidence of Catherine's fear in those final days. The sheriff had looked at him with something between pity and contempt and said what everyone else said: grief does terrible things to a man's judgment. Sometimes accidents are just accidents. Sometimes we look for conspiracies because the random cruelty of the world is too hard to accept. So Nate had stopped looking outward and started building walls inward. Sold off most of the cattle, kept just enough horses to maintain the ranch, sent away the hands except for 2 men who understood that Nate wanted work done, not conversation. He turned Thunder Creek into a fortress of routine, where the only sounds were wind through timber and water running over stone. He couldn't think about water, couldn't think about the river, couldn't close his eyes without seeing Catherine's face beneath the surface, pale and still, her dark hair floating around her like seaweed. Nate set his coffee cup on the porch railing with careful precision. "Can you handle ranch cooking, biscuits that don't break teeth, stew that sticks to rib?" "Yes, sir. I worked in a hotel kitchen for 2 years. I know what men need to fuel hard work." "The boy, he talk?" Iris's hand moved to Danny's shoulder, protective. "He's quiet, shy, but he's a good boy, helps where he can." "That's not what I asked." A pause. Iris's throat worked beneath the scarf, and Nate saw pain flicker across her face. "No, sir. Danny doesn't speak, hasn't said a word in almost 3 years. But he understands everything and he can write when needed. He won't be trouble." 3 years. The boy couldn't be more than 9. which meant something had happened to him when he was 6 years old, something bad enough to lock his voice away behind walls of silence. Nate knew about walls, about silence that felt safer than words. Back room off the kitchen, he heard himself say. It's small, but it's warm. Wages are fair, $3 a week, plus room and board for both of you. Work's honest. I don't tolerate theft or lies, but I also don't ask questions that aren't my business. Relief flooded Iris's face so completely it was almost painful to witness. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. You won't regret this, I promise. Just Bridger. Nobody's formal out here. He picked up his coffee, turned toward the door. Get yourself settled. Dinner's at 6. I like it hot and I like it filling, but beyond that, I'm not particular. He didn't look back as they gathered their meager belongings, 2 canvas bags and a wooden crate, and made their way inside. Didn't watch as Iris surveyed the kitchen that had been Catherine's domain, or as Danny explored the small room that would be their new home. He walked out to the barn, saddled his buckskin gelding, and rode out to check fence lines he'd already checked that morning, putting distance between himself and the decision he'd just made. The decision that would change everything. That first week, Iris and Danny moved through the ranch like ghosts trying not to disturb the living. Iris appeared before dawn to start coffee, and breakfast worked through the day with quiet efficiency and disappeared into their small room each evening like someone pulling a blanket over their head to hide from monsters in the dark. She cooked simple food, but substantial, the kind that filled a man's belly and fueled a full day's work. She cleaned without being asked, mended clothes Nate had been meaning to mend for months, kept the house in order without erasing the small traces of Catherine that Nate couldn't quite bring himself to remove. The photograph on the mantel, the books on the shelf arranged in the order Catherine preferred, the blue glass vase that caught morning light just so. Iris never touched those things, never asked about them, just worked around them like they were sacred objects in a shrine, which in a way they were. Danny helped where a 9-year-old could, fed the chickens, collected eggs, hauled water from the well. The boy moved with the careful quietness of someone who'd learned that being noticed was dangerous, and he never not once made eye contact with Nate for more than a heartbeat. But the boy watched, always watched. Those dark eyes tracked everything: Nate's movements around the ranch, Iris's routes through the house, the patterns of men and animals and weather. It was the watchfulness of prey, constant vigilance that never rested. Nate recognized it because he'd seen it in himself every morning for 4 years, that moment of waking, when he had to remember all over again that Catherine was gone and the world was still dangerous and there was nothing he could do about either truth. On the 5th night, Nate woke at 2 in the morning to the sound of something breaking in the kitchen. He grabbed the pistol he kept by the bed and moved through the dark house in his bare feet, every sense alert. The sound had been sharp, sudden glass or ceramic hitting the floor. An accident or an intruder. Either way, it needed addressing. The kitchen was dark except for a sliver of moonlight through the window. In that pale light, Nate saw Iris standing frozen by the basin, shaking so hard her whole body vibrated. At her feet, a shattered pitcher spread water across the wooden floor in a growing pool. She hadn't heard him approach. Her eyes were fixed on the water, wide and unseeing, her breathing rapid and shallow, like someone drowning in air. Her hands opened and closed convulsively at her sides, and her lips moved in silent words. No, 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 please, no. Nate set the pistol on the table with deliberate noise, letting her know he was there. Iris. She didn't respond, didn't even flinch, just kept staring at the water, trapped in whatever private hell had seized her. Iris, he said again, louder. Still nothing. He moved closer, careful not to startle her, and touched her shoulder lightly. You're safe. You're at Thunder Creek. It's just water from the pitcher. You're safe. The moment his hand made contact, Iris came back to herself with a clasp that sounded like surfacing from deep water. She stumbled backward, nearly falling, and Nate caught her elbow to steady her. I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll clean it up. I'll pay for the pitcher. I couldn't sleep and I wanted water. And when I poured it, the sound. She cut herself off, pressed a hand to her mouth. In the moonlight, Nate could see tears on her face. What sound? He asked quietly. Iris shook her head, wouldn't answer, but Nate had seen enough to understand. The sound of water pouring, the sight of it spreading across the floor. Something about it had triggered a memory so vivid it had pulled her out of the present entirely. Just like the river did to him, just like any sound of rushing water could transport him back to that day. The shouts, the splashing, the terrible heaviness of Catherine's body when they'd finally pulled her out, water streaming from her clothes and hair, and open mouth. Go back to bed, Nate said, his voice gentler than he'd known it could still be. I'll clean this up. I can do it. I said go. Iris hesitated, then nodded and fled. Nate stood alone in the kitchen, looking down at the spilled water, and for the first time in 4 years, he recognized his own brokenness reflected in someone else. He cleaned up the glass, mopped the water, stood at the window and watched the moon set behind the mountains, wondering what had happened to Iris Whitmore that made the sound of pouring water trigger such complete terror, and wondering why he cared. The next morning, Nate found Danny sitting alone behind the horse barn, crying without sound. The boy's thin shoulders shook with the force of his sobs, but his mouth stayed closed, his throat working uselessly around screams that couldn't escape. Tears streamed down his face and his hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white, but no sound emerged except the faint, desperate wheeze of air forced through a constricted windpipe. Nate stood watching for a long moment, unsure of what to do. He had no experience with children, had no particular desire to acquire any. Catherine had wanted them, had dreamed of filling Thunder Creek with the sound of young voices and laughter, but that dream had drowned with her. Still, this was a child in pain, and Nate wasn't so far gone that he could just walk away. He crossed to where Danny sat and lowered himself to the ground nearby, not touching, not speaking, just present. He pulled a piece of soft pine from his pocket. He'd been planning to whittle something to pass time later, and his knife, and started working the wood with slow, deliberate strokes. Danny's crying gradually subsided. The boy watched Nate's hands through tear-blurred eyes, his breathing evening out as he focused on the steady rhythm of the knife, peeling away thin curls of wood. They sat like that for maybe 20 minutes. Nate carved. Danny watched. Neither spoke. Finally, the boy's hand unclenched. He reached out tentatively and picked up one of the wood shavings, turning it over in his small fingers with something like wonder. Nate carved a bit more, then held out the knife handle first to Danny. Want to try? The boy's eyes widened. He looked at the knife, at Nate, back to the knife. Then slowly he nodded. Nate showed him how to hold the blade, how to angle the cut, how to let the wood tell you where it wanted to part. Danny's first attempts were clumsy, but he had the right instinct. Patience, attention, respect for the material. Good, Nate said when Danny managed a clean shaving. Real good. You've got the touch for it. Danny didn't smile, but something eased in his face. Some small measure of the terrible tension he carried constantly. When Iris came looking for him an hour later, she found them still sitting together, a small pile of wood shavings between them and the beginning of something that might have been a horse taking shape in Danny's hands. Her eyes met Nate's over the boy's head, and in that look was a question and a warning and a fragile hope all tangled together. Nate just nodded and went back to carving. On the 8th day, Vincent Ashford came to call. Nate was shoeing a horse when he heard the sound of hooves on the drive. He looked up to see a rider approaching on a black stallion that probably cost more than most men made in a year. The man himself was dressed in a tailored suit completely unsuited to ranch country, his dark hair slicked back beneath an expensive hat, his smile bright and utterly false. Everything about Vincent Ashford screamed money and power and the kind of charm that hid cruelty the way gilt paint hid cheap metal. Beautiful property, Vincent called out as he dismounted with practiced grace. You must be Nathaniel Bridger. I'm Vincent Ashford. I own the Golden Flame Saloon in Missoula. Pleasure to meet you. Nate straightened, wiped his hands on his work pants. What can I do for you, Ashford? Actually, I'm here about Iris Whitmore. Vincent's smile widened. I heard through the grapevine that she's working for you now. I wanted to make sure she's settling in all right. See, Iris is like family to me. I gave her work when she had nothing, helped her get back on her feet after some difficulties. I worry about her. Every instinct Nate possessed screamed that this man was lying. She's fine, doing good work. I'm so glad to hear it. Vincent reached into his coat and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. I brought some things for young Danny. A few books, some peppermint sticks. The boy has had such a hard time, you know. Such trauma. I've tried to be there for him, but Iris, well, she has her struggles. What kind of struggles? Has she not told you? Vincent's expression shifted to concern so perfectly performed it was almost convincing. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Iris doesn't like to talk about her condition. But given that you're employing her, you should know. She suffers from episodes. Delusions, really. She imagines terrible things that never happen, truly believes them. I've tried to help her get treatment, but she refuses. He pulled another paper from his coat, unfolded it carefully. This is from Dr. Harrison in Missoula. He treated Iris last year after a particularly bad episode. You can read it yourself. Paranoid ideation, persecution, complex, difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy. She's not dangerous, you understand, just troubled. Nate took the paper, scanned it. It looked official, doctor's letterhead, professional, language, official stamp. It described Iris as suffering from severe mental instability following an unspecified trauma, prone to making false accusations against people she perceived as threats. Why are you showing me this? Because I care about Iris and Danny, and I want to make sure they're in good hands. And because Vincent's voice dropped, became confidential. If Iris starts telling you stories about me, about things she claims I did, I want you to understand they're not real. They're manifestations of her illness. I would never hurt her. I've only ever tried to help. The speech was smooth, practiced. The kind of thing a man says when he's said it before, refined it, perfected it until it sounds like absolute truth. And maybe it would have worked out on someone who hadn't spent 4 years watching people lie about Catherine's death, who hadn't learned to recognize the particular cadence of powerful men protecting themselves by destroying someone else's credibility. I'll keep that in mind, Nate said neutrally. Was there anything else? Vincent's smile thinned slightly. Just this. Danny is a special boy. I've grown quite fond of him over the years. If Iris's condition worsens, if she becomes unable to care for him properly, I want you to know I'm prepared to take responsibility for the child. I have the means to provide for him to get him the help he needs. I even have preliminary adoption papers drawn up, should it become necessary. The boy has a mother. Iris is his aunt, not his mother, Vincent corrected gently. His mother died in childbirth. Tragic story. Iris took him in, which was admirable, but she's not equipped for the responsibility, not with her fragile mental state. The lies rolled off his tongue like honey, smooth and sweet and poisonous. Nate handed back the doctor's letter. I appreciate the concern, but Iris and Danny are doing fine here. They're not going anywhere. Something cold flickered behind Vincent's eyes there and gone in an instant. Of course, I just wanted to make sure you knew the full situation. For everyone's safety. He remounted his stallion with fluid grace. Give Iris my regards. Tell her I'll be checking in regularly, just to make sure she has everything she needs. The threat was clear, even wrapped in courtesy. Vincent rode off at a leisurely pace, a man with all the time in the world and absolute confidence in his own power. Nate stood watching until he disappeared, then went to find Iris. She was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, her movements sharp and jerky, her face pale. She'd seen Vincent arrive from the window, had probably heard every word. He's lying, Nate said without preamble. About you being mentally ill. About Danny being your nephew. About everything. I know it, and you know I know it. Iris's hand stilled in the dough. How? Because I've heard that particular kind of lie before. The kind powerful men tell when they want to discredit someone who threatens them. The kind that sounds perfectly reasonable until you stop and think about why they're working so hard to convince you. Slowly, Iris raised her eyes to meet his. He has documents, witnesses. He can make anyone believe anything. Maybe, but not me. Nate pulled out a chair, sat down. I'm going to ask you something and I want the truth. Is Danny your son? The question landed like a stone in still water. Iris's face crumpled, and she nodded once, sharp and painful. And Vincent, no. The word came out fierce. Not him. Never him. Danny's father was someone else, someone who didn't ask, who didn't care. I was 19 and working at a boarding house, and he was a guest, and one night her voice broke. I couldn't tell anyone, couldn't ask for help. Unwed mothers get sent to asylums, or worse. So I hid the pregnancy, had Danny alone in an abandoned cabin, and told everyone he was my nephew, my sister's child taken in out of charity after she died in childbirth. And Vincent knows the truth. Vincent knows everything. Iris's hands trembled. He found out somehow, I don't know how, but he did. He offered to help me, gave me work at the Golden Flame, let Danny and me live in a room above the saloon. I thought he was kind. I thought. She closed her eyes. I was so stupid. You were desperate. Not the same thing. He waited, Iris continued, her voice hollow. Waited until I was dependent on him, until I had nowhere else to go. Then he started making demands. Said I owed him for his generosity. That women in my position didn't get to refuse men like him. When I said no, She touched her throat where the bruises had been now faded to yellow-green shadows beneath the scarf. I tried to fight back, tried to scream. He put his hands around my throat and squeezed until everything went dark. When I woke up, he told me if I ever refused him again, if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure Danny was taken away, put in an orphanage or worse. He said with my history, with his documentation of my mental instability, no one would believe me over him. So you ran. I took Danny and we left in the middle of the night. I'd heard you needed help that you kept to yourself, didn't go into town much. I thought if we could just disappear for a while, maybe he'd forget about us. Move on to someone easier. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Men like Vincent Ashford don't forget, and they don't move on. They see people, especially women, as possessions, things they own. You running didn't make him lose interest. It made you a challenge. I know. Iris's voice was barely audible. But what else could I do? Where else could I go? Nowhere. You did exactly right coming here. Nate stood, walked to the window. Outside, Danny was feeding chickens with the serious concentration he brought to every task. Vincent showed me a letter from a doctor. Said you had delusions, paranoid episodes. It looked real. He has connections, money. He can buy anything, documents, testimony, officials. That's how he operates. That's how he's gotten away with it for so long. Gotten away with what exactly? Iris met his eyes. Hurting women, taking them, using them. And when they try to leave or speak up, he destroys their credibility so thoroughly that no one believes him. He's been doing it for years. I'm not the first. I won't be the last. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth and horror. My wife, Nate said slowly, 4 years ago, she drowned in the river. They said it was an accident. But you don't believe that. No, Catherine was investigating something before she died. Women going missing in Missoula. She'd found a pattern, she said, a connection. She was going to the territorial marshal with evidence. He turned to face Iris. She died before she could. Understanding dawned in Iris's eyes. Vincent, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. He paused. And I'm going to make sure he never hurts you or Danny or anyone else again. You can't fight him. He's too powerful, too connected. Maybe, but I have to try. Because if I don't, who will? Before Iris could answer, the kitchen door burst open and Danny tumbled in his face, white with terror. The boy grabbed Iris's skirt, pointing frantically toward the window. Nate looked out and saw a man on horseback at the edge of the property, watching the house through field glasses. One of Vincent's people, a reminder that they were being watched, that Vincent knew exactly where they were. Pack your things, Nate said quietly. Both of you. There's a cabin up in the high meadow about half a day's ride north. It's remote, hard to find. You'll be safe there while I figure out our next move. What are you going to do? Nate looked down at Danny, at this boy who had lost his voice to trauma, who lived in constant fear, who deserved better than a world where men like Vincent Ashford could operate with impunity. I'm going to find the truth, he said, and then when I'm going to burn Vincent Ashford's empire to the ground. The cabin in the high meadow sat exactly where Nate remembered it, tucked into a fold of timber, where the grassland met the tree line, invisible unless you knew to look. Catherine's Aunt Emma had lived here summers back before she died, tending a small flock of sheep and enjoying the solitude that came with altitude and distance. Nate hadn't been up here since Catherine's death, couldn't bear the memories of summer afternoons when they'd ridden up together, bringing Emma supplies and staying for meals filled with laughter and stories. But the structure was sound log walls, chinked tight, a good roof, shuttered windows, and a stone fireplace that drew clean. It would keep Iris and Danny safe, at least for a while. They arrived as afternoon light painted the meadow gold and shadows stretched long from the surrounding timber. Danny slid from the saddle Nate had settled him in and immediately began exploring with the cautious curiosity of a child who'd learned to check every space for danger before relaxing. Iris dismounted more slowly, her body stiff from the ride. She looked at the cabin, at the endless sky stretching overhead, at the miles of forest insulating them from the world below, and something in her face eased fractionally. "How long do we stay here?" she asked. "Until I come back with answers. Could be a week, could be longer." Nate unloaded supplies from the pack horse, food, ammunition, lamp oil, everything they'd need for an extended stay. "I'm going to Butte first, then Helena. There's a woman named Maeve Sullivan in Butte who might have information. And a federal marshal in Helena I need to talk to. About Vincent. About the women who've disappeared. About patterns and connections and building a case strong enough that Vincent's money can't make it disappear." Iris helped him carry supplies inside. The cabin's interior was dusty but intact. A main room with the fireplace, a sleeping loft, a small kitchen area. Simple. Defensible. Remote enough that Vincent would have to work to find it if he even knew to look. "There's a rifle above the door," Nate said, showing her. "Ammunition in this box. You know how to shoot." Vincent taught me. Her mouth twisted bitterly. "He liked taking his girls to shoot bottles behind the saloon. Said it made us feel protected. Really, it was just another way to control us, give us a skill, then remind us we'd never be good enough to use it against him." "You're good enough." Nate met her eyes. "If he comes here, if anyone comes here that you don't know, you shoot first and ask questions after. You understand? I won't let anyone take Danny." "Good." He moved to the door, paused. "Iris, the letter you were writing, the ones you never send. Who are they to?" She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. "Then Danny's father, the man who raped me. I write to tell him he has a son, that his violence created something beautiful anyway. That Danny is the best thing in my life, even though he came from the worst thing." She looked at Nate. "I never send them because he doesn't deserve to know, doesn't deserve to have any claim to Danny even in knowledge. But writing them helps me remember that Danny isn't defined by how he came into this world." Nate nodded slowly. He understood about letters that would never be sent, words that needed to be written, but not delivered. He'd written dozens to Catherine in the months after she died, apologies, questions, desperate pleas for her to tell him what she'd discovered so he could finish what she'd started. "I'll be back in 2 weeks," he said. "Maybe less. You see anyone suspicious, you hide. You hear anyone coming up the trail, you assume it's hostile until proven otherwise. And if something happens to me," he pulled an envelope from his coat. "This is for you, instructions, deed to the ranch, names of people who can help. Open it if I'm not back in 3 weeks. Don't talk like that. I'm being realistic. Vincent is dangerous, and I'm about to poke a hornet's nest. You need to be prepared." Before Iris could respond, Danny appeared in the doorway holding something small and wooden. The horse Nate had helped him start carving. The boy had worked on it every day, and now it was recognizable, a Mustang, with head-high muscles bunched, captured in the moment before flight. Danny held it out to Nate. "For me?" Nate asked. The boy nodded solemnly. "That's fine work, Danny. Real fine. I'll keep it safe, I promise." He tucked the carved horse into his vest pocket next to the pocket watch Catherine had given him on their 5th anniversary. 2 talismans against whatever darkness waited ahead. Danny reached up and, in a gesture that made Nate's throat tighten unexpectedly, wrapped his thin arms around Nate's waist in a fierce hug. Nate stood frozen for a heartbeat, then carefully returned the embrace. "I'll come back," he said quietly. "That's a promise, too." When he pulled away, Iris was watching them with tears in her eyes. Nate mounted his buckskin, turned the horse's head toward the trail down the mountain, and rode away from the only 2 people who'd made him feel something besides grief in 4 years. He didn't look back. Looking back was how you lost your nerve. Butte sprawled across the hills like a copper-stained wound in the earth. Mining town grown fat on ore and greed, where money flowed like water and men died in the shafts below, as casually as candles burning out. Nate had been here once before with Catherine buying breeding stock. They'd left as quickly as possible, both disturbed by the casual violence and desperation that hung over the place like smoke. Now he was back looking for a woman named Maeve Sullivan, who lived at a boarding house on the eastern edge of town. He found the address. Iris had given him, a tired three-story building with peeling paint and laundry hanging from the fire escape. The landlady who answered his knock looked him over with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen every variety of trouble walk through her door. "I'm looking for Maeve Sullivan," Nate said. "And who's asking?" "Name's Nathaniel Bridger. I run a ranch outside Missoula. I'm here about Vincent Ashford." The landlady's expression hardened. "No, ma'am. Just someone trying to stop a bad man from hurting more people." She studied him for a long moment, then called over her shoulder, "Maeve, someone here about that business." Footsteps on stairs. Then a woman appeared, early 30s, dark hair pulled back severely, eyes that had witnessed too much and trusted too little. She wore a simple work dress and had ink stains on her fingers, the marks of someone who did bookkeeping or clerical work. "You're Bridger?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Iris Whitmore sent you." "In a manner of speaking, she told me you might have information about Vincent Ashford, about what he does, what he's done." Maeve's jaw tightened. "Would hear. There's a church 3 blocks north. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Come alone and unarmed. I'll know if you're not." She disappeared back upstairs before Nate could respond. 20 minutes later, Nate sat in the back pew of St. Patrick's Catholic Church. His gun left with the landlady as instructed, waiting in the colored light that filtered through stained glass windows. The church was empty except for an old woman praying near the altar, her whispered words rising like smoke in the incense-scented air. Maeve entered from a side door, glanced around to confirm they were alone, and slid into the pew beside him. "I'm not doing this out of trust," she said without preamble. "I'm doing this because Iris survived and most women don't. If you're legitimate, if you can actually do something to stop Vincent, then I'll help. But if you're working for him, if this is some trick to find out what I know—" "I'm not working for him. He came to my ranch 3 days ago to tell me Iris is mentally ill, and I shouldn't believe anything she says." That's when I knew she was telling the truth. Maeve's expression shifted fractionally. "He always does that. Preemptive character assassination. Make sure no one believes the victim before she even has a chance to speak." She pulled a leather portfolio from beneath her shawl, set it between them on the pew. "My sister, Caroline. She worked at the Golden Flame 2 years ago. Vincent took an interest in her. She tried to refuse politely." Maeve opened the portfolio to reveal newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, dates and times meticulously documented. "She disappeared 6 weeks after starting work there. Vincent said she ran off with a gambler, made it sound like she was flighty and irresponsible. But I knew Caroline. She was saving money to open a dress shop. She had plans. She would never just vanish." "You think Vincent killed her?" "I think Vincent is connected to something bigger than one saloon, bigger than one town. I think there's a network, an organization that traffics women across territorial lines, moves them from place to place, sells them to whoever's buying." Maeve's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she turned pages. "I've been tracking patterns for 2 years. Women who disappear from Missoula. Women who turn up in Denver or Cheyenne or Salt Lake, traumatized and broken if they turn up at all. Always the same story: they worked at the Golden Flame or one of Vincent's other properties. They caught his attention. They disappeared." Nate studied the documentation. It was comprehensive, obsessive, the work of someone who devoted their life to finding answers. "Why haven't you gone to the law?" "I tried. Sheriff in Missoula told me I was imagining things. Territorial Marshal in Helena said without bodies or witnesses, there was nothing to investigate. Vincent has friends everywhere, judges, politicians, lawmen. He contributes to campaigns and building funds and charity drives. Everyone knows him. Everyone likes him. Who's going to believe a bookkeeper with a theory over a pillar of the community? Someone who's seen what I've seen." Nate met her eyes. "My wife died 4 years ago investigating this same pattern. I think Vincent had her killed to protect his operation." Maeve went very still. "Your wife was Catherine Bridger. You knew her. She wrote to me 6 months before she died, said she'd heard about Caroline's disappearance and was looking into similar cases. She wanted to meet to compare information." Maeve's eyes filled with tears. "I was too afraid. I'd spent so long keeping my head down, not making waves, terrified Vincent would find out what I knew. I wrote back saying I couldn't help her. 2 weeks later, I heard she'd drowned. The weight of that missed connection settled between them like a physical thing. I've blamed myself every day since, Maeve said quietly. If I'd been braver, if I'd met with her, maybe we could have stopped him then. Maybe she'd still be alive. Or maybe you'd both be dead and nothing would have changed. Nate took the portfolio, studied the names and dates. 12 women, 12 disappearances spanning 3 years. A pattern too consistent to be coincidence. I'm going to Helena to talk to Marshal Theodore Cross. He's federal investigates cross-border crime. This is exactly his jurisdiction. I already tried him. He said he needed more than my theories. He needs witnesses, evidence, women willing to testify. Nate looked at her directly. Would you testify, put your name on record, risk Vincent's retaliation? Maeve was quiet for a long time. If it would stop him, if it would save even one woman from what Caroline went through. She nodded slowly. Yes, I'll testify. I'll put every shred of information I have on record. I'll stand up at court and tell the world what Vincent Ashford really is. It won't be safe. I stopped being safe the moment my sister disappeared. At least this way her death might mean something. The ride to Helena took 3 days through country that shifted from mountains to rolling prairie. Nate pushed hard, sleeping rough and eating cold food driven by a sense that time was running short. Every day he was gone was a day Iris and Danny spent isolated and vulnerable, and every day Vincent had to discover what Nate was doing and move to counter it. Helena sprawled at the base of the mountain's territorial capital with brick buildings and paved streets, the kind of place where law theoretically mattered more than money. Theoretically. The federal marshal's office occupied a modest building near the center of town, identified by a painted sign and an American flag. Nate found Marshal Theodore Cross there, late on a Friday afternoon, a lean man in his 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that suggested he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and still showed up to work anyway. Help you, Cross asked, looking up from paperwork. My name is Nathaniel Bridger. I need to talk to you about a trafficking operation running out of Missoula. Cross set down his pen. That's a serious accusation. You have evidence. Nate laid out everything: Iris's testimony, Maeve's documentation, the pattern of disappearances, Vincent's threats, the suspicious circumstances of Catherine's death. He spoke for nearly an hour while Cross listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, but mostly just absorbing information with the focus of a professional investigator. When Nate finished, Cross was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. I know about Vincent Ashford, he said. I've been investigating him for 18 months. The revelation hit Nate like cold water. You knew? I knew he was connected to something dirty. Suspected trafficking, but couldn't prove it. Every time I got close to witnesses, they'd recant or disappear. Every time I tried to build a case, evidence would vanish or turn out to be inadmissible. Cross opened the folder, revealing his own documentation, surveillance reports, financial records, witness statements. Vincent has protection, political connections that go higher than you'd think. He's careful, smart, always stays one step ahead of prosecution. Then why hasn't he been stopped? Because knowing something and proving it in court are different things. I need witnesses willing to testify. I need documentation that can't be dismissed. I need a case so solid that Vincent's lawyers can't dismantle it and his political friends can't make it disappear. Cross looked at Nate. You're offering me that case. I'm offering you the start of one. Iris Whitmore will testify. Maeve Sullivan will testify. Between them, they can establish a pattern going back years. It's not enough. I need physical evidence, documentation of the trafficking network, names of other victims who can corroborate. And I need it done carefully because the moment Vincent suspects a federal investigation, he'll destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. How long will that take? Months, maybe a year. I'll need to place an agent in Missoula, gather intelligence, build the case piece by piece without alerting Vincent. Nate felt frustration rise in his chest. We don't have a year. Vincent knows I'm asking questions. He's threatened to take Iris's son. Every day we wait is a day he has to hurt more women or silence the ones who might speak against him. I understand your urgency, But rushing this means failure. And failure means Vincent walks free, and your witnesses end up discredited or dead. Cross leaned forward. I'm offering you something better than revenge, Bridger. I'm offering you justice that lasts. But it requires patience. Before Nate could respond, Cross pulled another document from the folder. There's something else you should know. Your wife, Catherine. She didn't just investigate disappearances, she contacted me 2 months before she died. Sent me a letter with preliminary information about Vincent's operation. She was going to meet me in Helena with full documentation. The room seemed to tilt. She never told me. She probably didn't want to put you at risk. Catherine knew what she was doing was dangerous. Cross's expression was grim. I've always believed her death wasn't an accident. I've suspected Vincent had her killed, but I could never prove it. Her letter mentioned a source, someone inside Vincent's organization willing to provide evidence. But Catherine died before she could give me the name, and I never found out who it was. A source, someone inside Vincent's operation. Someone who'd known what he was doing and wanted to stop it. I need to find that person, Nate said. Agreed, but carefully. If we spook them, they'll disappear. If Vincent finds out they talked to Catherine, he'll kill him if he hasn't already. Cross walked to a map of Montana on the wall. Here's what I propose. I open an official investigation, quiet and careful. I send an agent to Missoula to observe Vincent, track his movements, identify potential witnesses. Meanwhile, you go back to your ranch, act normal. Don't give Vincent any reason to think you're a threat. Keep Iris and the boy hidden and safe. We build this case methodically over the next 6 months. Then we move all at once. Arrest Vincent, file federal charges, make everything public before he can cover his tracks. And in those 6 months, how many more women disappear? Fewer than if we rush this and fail, Cross said bluntly. I know it's not the answer you want, but it's the answer that works. Nate wanted to argue, wanted to demand immediate action, wanted to ride back to Missoula and drag Vincent into the street and beat him until he confessed everything. Wanted justice now, not later. But he knew Cross was right. Knew that rushing in angry would just get people killed and let Vincent escape. 6 months, Nate said. But if he makes a move against Iris or Danny in that time, I'm not waiting for your investigation. I'll do what needs doing. Fair enough. Cross extended his hand. Welcome to the long game, Bridger. It's not satisfying, but it's how we win. They shook on it, and Nate tried not to think about everything that could go wrong in 6 months. The ride back to Thunder Creek took 4 days. Nate deliberately stopped in Missoula, made himself visible, bought supplies at the general store, and had a drink at a saloon 2 blocks from the Golden Flame. Let people see him. Let word get back to Vincent that Bridger was back in town conducting normal business, apparently unconcerned. It was theater. Performance designed to convince Vincent that his visit to the ranch had worked, that Nate had bought the story about Iris's mental illness and backed down from any thoughts of interference. On the 3rd day, Vincent's man found him. Nate was loading supplies onto his pack horse when a thick-built man with scarred knuckles approached. Mr. Ashford wants to see you. Buy you a drink, talk friendly-like. I'm busy. Wasn't a request. Nate considered refusing, but that would break the performance. So he tied off the horse and followed the man to the Golden Flame. The saloon was exactly what Nate expected. Polished wood and brass fixtures, gaming tables where serious money changed hands. Well-dressed women working the floor with practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Everything designed to project success and respectability while extracting maximum profit from desperate men. Vincent sat at a private table in the back, 2 more enforcers standing nearby. He smiled when he saw Nate and gestured to the empty chair across from him. Bridger, good to see you. Whiskey. I'm not staying long. Of course. Rancher's life is a busy one. Vincent poured 2 glasses anyway. I just wanted to check in, make sure we understand each other. About Iris, you hired her despite my warnings. I respect that man's got a right to employ who he wants on his own property. But I wanted to make sure you're aware of the full situation, aware that her episodes can be dangerous, that the boy needs special care, that I have a legal obligation to ensure their welfare. The lies flowed smooth as silk. Nate sipped his whiskey, let Vincent talk, played the role of a man being convinced. I appreciate your concern, he said when Vincent finally paused. But Iris seems stable to me. Cooks good, keeps quiet, no trouble at all. The boy's shy but helpful. I've got no complaints. No strange stories, no wild accusations about things that supposedly happened at my establishment. Nothing like that. She mostly keeps to herself. Good, that's very good. Vincent's smile widened. See, I worry about Iris. Worry she might have one of her episodes and say things that could damage my reputation. Make accusations that have no basis in reality. I'd hate for that to happen. Hate for her to force me to take legal action to protect myself. The threat was clear, even wrapped in concern. If she was going to make accusations, I expect she'd have done it already, Nate said. Far as I can tell, she just wants to be left alone to raise her nephew in peace. That's all any of us want, that isn't it, peace? Vincent raised his glass. To understanding. Nate clinked his glass against Vincent, drank, and left as quickly as politeness allowed. Outside, he stood in the street and let the fury burning in his chest cool to something manageable. Vincent thought he'd won, thought Nate had been convinced or intimidated into backing down. Good, let him think that, let him relax his guard, because while Vincent was congratulating himself, Marshall Cross was building a case. And when it came time to spring the trap, Vincent's confidence would be the very thing that destroyed him. Nate mounted his horse and rode out of Missoula toward Thunder Creek, very aware of Vincent's man watching from the saloon window, no doubt ready to report that Bridger seemed convinced, seemed harmless, seemed like he was going to stay out of Vincent's business. Performance complete. Nate reached the cabin in the high meadow on a gray afternoon when rain threatened from low clouds. He called out before approaching, not wanting Iris to shoot him by mistake. She appeared in the doorway, rifle lowered, when she saw it was him, relief flooding her face. You came back. Said I would. He dismounted, started unpacking supplies. How have you been? It's safe, quiet, no one's come near. She helped him carry things inside. Danny's been fishing the creek up above the cabin. He's gotten good at it. Inside the cabin felt warmer somehow. Lived in. Danny had built a small shelf for his growing collection of carved animals, horses, deer, a bear, and owl. The boy himself was by the fire working on what looked like a mountain lion. When he saw Nate, his face lit up, not a smile exactly, but something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something like hope. I brought you more whittling wood, Nate said, pulling out pieces of soft pine and hard maple. Thought you might be running low. Danny took the wood, carefully held up the mountain lion for Nate's inspection. That's fine work, real fine. You're getting better every day. Over a dinner of venison stew and biscuits, Nate told Iris about Helena, about Marshall Cross, and the investigation about the need to wait and build a case carefully instead of rushing in. 6 months, Iris repeated, her voice flat. We hide here for 6 months while Vincent continues hurting people. Or we rush in now, Vincent destroys the evidence and kills the witnesses, and he walks free forever. Which would you prefer? Iris was quiet for a long time. I know you're right. I know patience is the smart play. But every day we wait, I think about the woman Vincent's hurting right now. The one who's in the position I was in, terrified and trapped, and thinking there's no way out. Then we make sure the case is so strong he never hurts anyone again. Not just stopping him, temporarily destroying his operation completely. And if he comes for us before then Cross's investigation becomes the least of Vincent's problems. Danny had been listening quietly while pretending to focus on his carving. Now he set down his knife and picked up a piece of paper and a pencil. Slowly, carefully, he wrote 2 words on a basement. Iris went white. Danny, no, you don't have to. But the boy kept writing, his hands shaking, but determined, I saw. He heard her. She screamed. Then quiet. Blood. The words hung in the air like accusations from the grave. Who's Anna? Nate asked gently. A woman who worked at the Golden Flame, Iris whispered. She disappeared about 6 months before Danny and I ran. Vincent said she quit and moved to California. She looked at her son with anguish. You saw what happened to her. Danny nodded, wrote basement door open. I watched. He didn't see me. 3 years of silence. 3 years of holding this horror inside because speaking meant reliving it, meant admitting what he'd witnessed, meant putting words to something too terrible to name. Vincent doesn't know you saw, Nate said. Danny shook his head. Good, that's good. Because what you witnessed, that's evidence. That's the kind of testimony that can't be dismissed or explained away. Nate leaned forward. But Danny, I need you to understand something. If you tell what you saw, you'll have to say it in court, in front of judges and lawyers and Vincent himself. You'll have to speak it all out loud. Can you do that? The boy looked at his mother, at Nate, at the words he'd written. Then with terrible determination, he nodded. He's 9 years old, Iris said, her voice breaking. He's been through so much already. I can't ask him to. Danny put his small hand over hers and wrote one more thing: I want to help. I want him to stop. The rain that had threatened all afternoon finally came that night, drumming on the cabin roof in a steady rhythm that should have been soothing but instead set Nate's nerves on edge. He couldn't sleep, kept thinking about Danny's words written in a child's careful handwriting. Anna, basement, blood. Kept thinking about Catherine diving into an investigation that had gotten her killed. Kept thinking about Vincent Ashford sitting in his saloon, confident and protected, while women disappeared and a 9-year-old boy carried the weight of witnessing murder. 6 months felt like forever when you knew what was happening in the dark. Nate rose quietly, careful not to wake Iris and Danny sleeping in the loft. He built up the fire, made coffee, and sat watching flames consume wood while rain pattered against the windows. He heard footsteps on the ladder. Iris descended wrapped in a blanket, her hair loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Too much thinking. She poured herself coffee and sat in the other chair. For a while, they just existed in companionable silence, two people who understood that sometimes the nighttime thoughts were too heavy for words. Finally, Iris spoke. When Danny was born, I was alone in an abandoned trapper's cabin, 15 miles from anywhere. I'd hidden the pregnancy, saved what money I could, and when the time came, I walked into the woods and delivered him myself. Nate said nothing, just listened. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. The pain, the fear, the certainty I was going to die, and this baby was going to die, and no one would ever know what happened to us. But Danny came into the world screaming healthy and alive, and I held him, and I made a promise. What promise? That I would keep him safe, no matter what it cost, no matter what I had to sacrifice. Her voice cracked. I've broken that promise so many times, let him witness things no child should see. Put him in danger because I was weak, because I didn't run soon enough, because I made stupid choices. You did the best you could with the options you had. Did I, because my best got him traumatized so badly he stopped speaking? My best put us in Vincent's path. My best. Your best kept him alive, Nate interrupted. Your best got you both out when you had the chance. Your best brought you to someone who's going to help you fight back instead of just keep running. He set down his coffee cup. You want to know what I think? I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. And I think Danny knows that, which is why he's willing to speak up. Because you taught him that silence protects monsters, but truth, even when it's hard, protects the innocent. Iris was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I'm so tired of being brave. I just want to be safe. I want Danny to be safe. I want to wake up without wondering if today's the day Vincent finds us. Then we end it, not in 6 months, now. She looked up sharply. But Marshal Cross said, Cross is building a federal case that'll take time. But there's another way, a faster way. Nate leaned forward. We force Vincent's hand, make him react publicly in a way that exposes what he is. How? By doing what Catherine was doing before she died, finding the other victims, documenting their stories, and then making it all public in a way Vincent can't suppress. He'll kill us. Maybe, or maybe he'll panic and make mistakes. Maybe he'll overreact so dramatically that even his political protection won't save him. Nate paused. I'm not saying this is safe. I'm saying it's faster than waiting 6 months while he hurts more people. Iris wiped her eyes. What would we need to do? First, we find Catherine's source, the person inside Vincent's organization who was willing to talk to her. If they're still alive, still willing to help, they could give us documentation that would be devastating. And if they're not alive, then we find Anna's body, prove Danny's testimony, give Marshal Cross physical evidence that forces immediate action instead of a slow investigation. Vincent will have hidden her, probably buried her somewhere remote. Probably, but maybe there are records. Maybe there are other people who saw things. Maybe Nate stopped as a theory struck him. The doctor. You said Vincent has a doctor who creates false mental health records. That doctor has to be complicit, has to know what Vincent's doing. Dr. Harrison, he's been Vincent's physician for years. Doctors keep records, detailed records. If Harrison treated Vincent's victims, documented their injuries before helping cover them up, those records would be evidence. Iris's eyes widened. But how would we get them? We can't just walk into his office and ask. No, but we could acquire them other ways. Nate stood paced to the window. Outside, rain fell in silver sheets through the darkness. I need to go back to Missoula. I need to search Harrison's office, find those records, and see what else he's been documenting. That's breaking and entering. That's illegal. So is murder and trafficking. I'll take my chances with the law if it means stopping Vincent. But tomorrow night, during the town social, Vincent sponsors one every month, makes a big show of being community-minded. Everyone will be there, including Harrison. His office will be empty. I'm coming with you. No, you stay here with Danny. Stay safe. Danny can stay here. He'll be safer without me anyway. Vincent's looking for both of us, not just him alone. And you need someone who knows Harrison's office, layout, knows what to look for in medical records. Iris's jaw set with determination. I worked in that building for 6 months. I cleaned Harrison's office. I know where he keeps things. You need me. She was right, and Nate knew it. This is dangerous. Everything's dangerous. At least this way we're moving forward instead of just hiding. Nate studied her face, the determination there, the steel beneath the fear. This wasn't the same woman who'd appeared on his porch 3 weeks ago, barely able to meet his eyes. This was someone who'd found her strength in the dark and was ready to wield it. All right, he said, we do this together. But Danny stays here, and if anything goes wrong, you run. You don't try to help me, you don't try to fight, you run, and you get back to him. Understood? Understood. They shook on it, and Nate tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The next evening, Nate and Iris rode down from the high meadow, leaving Danny with strict instructions to stay hidden and only open the door for them. The boy had been frightened, but brave, had hugged his mother tight and given Nate the carved mountain lion as a talisman. For luck, Iris had translated from Danny's gestures. He says the mountain lion is strong and smart and doesn't get caught. Now they approached Missoula from the east, circling wide to avoid the main roads. The town was lit up with lanterns, and music drifted from the church hall where Vincent's monthly social was in full swing. The perfect cover. Dr. Harrison's office occupied the second floor of a building near the center of town. They waited in the shadows across the street until they saw Harrison himself leave, dressed in his finest suit, heading toward the social. Now, Nate said. They crossed quickly, and Iris produced a key from her pocket. I kept it when I left. Figured it might be useful someday. The office was dark and smelled of carbolic acid and old leather. Iris lit a small lantern, keeping the flame low, and moved directly to Harrison's filing cabinets. He keeps current patient files, here archived files in the back room. If he's documenting Vincent's victims, it'll be under false names or coded somehow. They worked quickly, methodically. Nate searched the desk while Iris went through files. For 20 minutes, they found nothing unusual, just standard medical records, billing statements, correspondence. Then Iris made a small sound. Here, look at this. She'd found a ledger, leather-bound, and locked away in the bottom drawer beneath stacks of old journals. Inside were entries in Harrison's handwriting, but coded initials instead of names, dates, descriptions of injuries that were clinical and damning. V, A patient. J, M, contusions to throat, broken ribs. L, side, extensive bruising. Treatment, laudanum for pain, binding for ribs. Patient instructed to claim fall from horse. Payment received. V, a patient. SK, lacerations requiring sutures, possible concussion. Patient states assault by employer. Treatment provided. Prepared statement of mental instability per VA request. Payment received. Page after page. Victim after victim. A meticulous record of Dr. Harrison treating women injured by Vincent Ashford and then helping cover up the crimes. This is it, Nate said. This is the evidence we need. There's more. Iris had moved to a locked cabinet in the back room. She jimmied it open with a letter opener and was pulling out files. These are the mental health evaluations Vincent uses to discredit victims. Harrison creates them wholesale. Look, he has blank forms with his signature already on them. Vincent just fills in the name and symptoms he wants documented. The corruption was breathtaking in its casual completeness. Nate gathered the ledger and the files. We take these to Marshall Cross tonight. This combined with witness testimony. The sound of footsteps on the stairs froze them both. Someone's coming, Iris whispered. They killed the lantern pressed back against the wall. The footsteps reached the landing outside. A key rattled in the lock. Dr. Harrison's voice. I just need to grab my medical bag, then we can return to the social. He wasn't alone. Another man's voice replied, Take your time, doctor. Mr. Ashford appreciates your thoroughness. Vincent's man, one of his enforcers. The door opened. Harrison entered, struck a match to light the office lamp. His eyes went immediately to the open filing cabinets, the disturbed desk. Something's wrong, he said sharply. Someone's been... Nate stepped from the shadows. Looking for these. He held up the ledger and files. Harrison went white. Bridger, what are you? You can't be here. That's private property, doctor-patient privilege. Privilege doesn't apply when you're documenting crimes and helping cover them up. Nate moved toward the door. Get out of my way. The enforcer, the same thick-built man who'd summoned Nate to the Golden Flame, blocked the exit. I don't think so. Mr. Ashford's going to want to hear about this. You too, Iris. He's been wondering where you disappeared to. Let us pass, Nate said quietly. Or what? You going to shoot me in the middle of town with a doctor as witness? The enforcer grinned. You got no play here, Bridger. Put down the papers and come quiet, or this gets ugly. Iris moved before Nate could. She grabbed a heavy glass bottle from Harrison's medical supplies and swung it hard into the enforcer's temple. The man dropped like a felled tree, blood streaming from the gash on his head. Run, she said. They ran, down the stairs, out into the street, sprinting for the horses they'd left tied 2 blocks away. Behind them, Harrison was shouting for help, and lights were coming on in windows. They reached the horses, mounted, and rode hard toward the edge of town. Nate could hear pursuit-forming voices, calling out someone, ringing the fire bell to raise alarm. We need to split up, Iris said as they hit the outskirts. You take the records to Marshall Cross and Helena. I'll lead them away, then circle back to Danny. No, we stay together. They're looking for both of us. If we split, they have to divide their search. You're faster on your own. You can make Helena in 2 days if you push hard. I know this country, no places to hide. She pulled her horse to a stop. Trust me, I can do this. Nate wanted to argue, wanted to insist they face this together. But she was right. Divided, they had a better chance of at least one of them getting through. The cabin, he said. If I don't hear from you in 5 days, I'm coming back. If you don't hear from me in 5 days, it means I got caught, and you need to finish this without me. She leaned over to kiss his cheek quickly. For luck. Now go. She wheeled her horse and rode north. Nate heard pursuit converging behind them and made his choice. He rode east toward Helena, toward Marshall Cross and federal authority, and the hope that these documents would be enough to end this. Behind him, Iris's horse disappeared into the darkness, leading Vincent's men away from the evidence that would destroy him. Nate rode through the night, the ledger and files tucked safely in his saddlebags, and prayed they'd both survive long enough to see Vincent Ashford face justice. 2 days later, Nate stood in Marshall Cross's office, hollow-eyed from lack of sleep, but triumphant. The documents were spread across Cross's desk, and the marshal was reading with increasing intensity. This is extraordinary, Cross said. This is documentation of systematic criminal conspiracy spanning years. With this and witness testimony, we have grounds for immediate arrest. Then do it. Arrest Vincent, arrest Harrison, shut down the whole operation. I will. But Bridger, you need to understand you obtained this evidence illegally. Breaking and entering, theft of private medical records. A good lawyer could argue these documents are inadmissible. Can you use them to get a warrant, to search legally and find the originals? Yes, I can swear out a federal warrant based on credible evidence of ongoing criminal activity. We'll raid Harrison's office and Vincent's property, simultaneously seize everything, arrest everyone involved. Cross stood. This is going to cause an uproar. Vincent has powerful friends, but with this documentation and the witness testimony, we can weather it. How long before you move? 3 days. I need to coordinate with my deputies, prepare the warrants, set up the raids so Vincent can't destroy evidence once he knows we're coming. 3 days. Nate felt exhaustion pulling at him. I need to get back to the cabin. Make sure Iris made it back safely. Make sure Danny's all right. You should rest first. You look half dead. I'll rest when Vincent's in chains. Cross nodded understanding. 3 days, Bridger. Then this ends. Nate rode out of Helena with renewed purpose. 2 days back to Thunder Creek, half a day up to the cabin, and he could verify Iris and Danny were safe. Then all they had to do was wait 3 more days for federal marshals to descend on Missoula and tear Vincent Ashford's empire apart. 3 more days. It seemed almost possible to hope. Nate reached Thunder Creek Ranch at sunset of the second day and immediately knew something was wrong. The main house door stood open. The barn showed signs of hasty searching equipment, disturbed feeds scattered. And in the dirt of the yard, multiple sets of boot prints that weren't his or his ranch hands. Vincent's men had been here, looking for something, or someone. Nate's heart kicked into his throat. He rode straight for the high meadow, pushing his exhausted horse harder than he should have, fear driving him up the mountain trail in fading light. The cabin appeared through the trees, and Nate shouted, "Iris! Danny, it's me!" No response. He dismounted, running, burst through the door. The cabin was empty. Signs of recent occupation, but no people. Danny's carvings still on the shelf. Iris's spare dress still hanging on a peg. But no note, no message, no indication of where they'd gone or if they'd left voluntarily. Nate searched frantically, checking the surrounding woods, calling their names until his voice went hoarse. Nothing. As darkness fell completely, Nate sat on the cabin steps with his head in his hands and faced the terrible possibility that Vincent had found them. That while Nate was in Helena delivering evidence, Vincent had taken the only two people who mattered. Then he saw it scratched into the dirt near the woodpile, barely visible in the moonlight. Letters formed with a stick in a child's careful hand. Men came. We hid. Going to town. Danny Town. They'd gone to Missoula, either running from Vincent's men or Nate's breath caught, or going after Vincent themselves. He was back on his horse in seconds, riding down the mountain in darkness that should have been suicide but felt like the only choice that made sense. If Iris and Danny had gone to confront Vincent, if they were walking into danger while Nate was miles away, he had to reach them before it was too late. The stars wheeled overhead and Nate rode through the night, racing against time and fear and the terrible certainty that everything was about to come to a head in the worst possible way. Nate reached Missoula as dawn broke cold and gray over the valley. The town was just stirring, shopkeepers opening shutters, early risers heading to work, smoke rising from chimneys into the still air. He rode straight to the boarding house where Maeve Sullivan lived, the only person in town he could trust. The landlady answered his pounding with a scowl that shifted to alarm when she saw his face. "Iris Whitmore and her boy," Nate said without preamble. "Have you seen them, Bridger? What are you? Have you seen them?" "No, but Maeve might have. She's not here, though, left before dawn with some woman and a child. Said she had urgent business." Nate's heart sank. "Where did they go?" "Didn't say. But she took that portfolio of hers, the one with all her sister's information. Looked determined." Determined. That could mean anything from seeking help to walking straight into Vincent's hands. Nate was turning to leave when the landlady caught his arm. "Whatever's happening, be careful. Word around town is Vincent's in a mood. Had his men out searching for something all night. And there's talk of a meeting at the church this morning. Public announcement, he's saying. Something about threats to the community. A public meeting. Vincent staging something to control the narrative before Marshall Cross could move. What time? 10 o'clock. Whole town's expected to attend." Nate checked his pocket watch. 3 hours. 3 hours to find Iris and Danny before whatever Vincent was planning came to fruition. He thanked the landlady and rode toward the center of town, eyes scanning every alley and doorway. Missoula was waking up properly now. Wagons moving, people gathering in small groups, everyone whispering about Vincent's mysterious announcement. Then Nate saw them. Iris and Danny walking toward the church with Maeve Sullivan beside them. Iris held Danny's hand tight, her face set with grim determination. They were moving through the growing crowd like swimmers fighting current, and Nate could see from their body language they weren't running. They were walking deliberately towards something. He dismounted and pushed through the crowd. Iris, she turned and relief flooded her face for just a moment before hardening back to resolve. You got the records to Marshall Cross. Yes, he's moving in 3 days with federal warrants. But what are you doing here? The cabin was empty. I thought Vincent had... His men came yesterday. We hid in the woods until they left. Then Danny convinced me we couldn't keep running. She looked down at her son. He wants to speak, publicly, before Vincent can spin whatever lie he's planning. Nate knelt to Danny's level. The boy's face was pale but determined, his dark eyes steady. You sure about this? Danny nodded, then slowly he opened his mouth and spoke for the first time in 3 years. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but the words were clear. I want to help. The sound of it, this child forcing words through years of silence, hit Nate like a physical blow. Iris was crying, her hand pressed to her mouth. He started talking last night, she said. Whispered at first, then stronger. Kept saying we had to stop hiding, that he had to tell what he saw. Vincent will be there, Nate said. He'll have his men. This could turn dangerous fast. I know, that's why I found Maeve, why we're doing this publicly, where he can't just make us disappear. Iris met his eyes. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of letting him control our lives through fear. Whatever happens today, at least we'll have spoken the truth out loud, where people can hear it. Maeve spoke up. I've already talked to Reverend Matthews. He's agreed to let us speak during the meeting. He doesn't know the details, but he knows something's wrong in this town, and he's willing to give us a platform. You know, Vincent will retaliate, Nate said. Let him try. I've got a reporter from the territorial newspaper here, sent him a telegram yesterday with enough details to get him interested. Whatever happens today, it'll be documented by someone who isn't in Vincent's pocket. A reporter. Witness testimony. Public forum. They were forcing Vincent's hand, making him react in front of the entire town instead of in the shadows where he operated best. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. All right, Nate said, then we do this together. But I want Danny behind me when we're up there. If Vincent makes a move, you get him out fast. They moved toward the church as the crowd thickened. People were streaming in from all directions, drawn by curiosity and the promise of drama. Nate recognized faces, shopkeepers, ranchers, town officials, people he'd done business with over the years. Ordinary people who'd chosen not to see what was happening in their midst because seeing meant having to act. Today, they wouldn't have that choice. The church was nearly full when they entered. Reverend Matthews stood at the front looking nervous but resolute. And there in the front row sat Vincent Ashford. He was dressed impeccably, as always, flanked by Dr. Harrison on one side and his lawyer Peterson on the other. 3 of his enforcers stood against the walls, trying to look casual, but fooling no one. Vincent's face showed mild interest, like this was just another community gathering, but his eyes tracked Iris and Danny with predatory focus. When he saw Nate, something flickered across his expression, surprise then calculation. Bridger, he called out, his voice carrying across the murmuring crowd. Good to see you. And Iris, Danny, I've been so worried about you both. When my men went to check on you at Bridger's ranch and found you disappeared, I feared the worst. The performance began immediately. Vincent, as the concerned benefactor, worried about his former employees. We're fine, Iris said, her voice steady despite the tremor Nate could feel running through her. I'm so glad, though I must say running off like that without a word was concerning. Made me worry your episodes were worsening. Vincent addressed the crowd now. As many of you know, I've been trying to help Iris for some time. She has a difficult condition, you see. Delusions. She imagines things that never happen, truly believes them. It's tragic, really. That's a lie, Maeve said loudly. Vincent turned his smile on her. Ah, Miss Sullivan. Still pursuing your unfortunate conspiracy theories about your sister's disappearance? I've tried to explain that Caroline left of her own free will, but grief can make us see shadows where none exist. Caroline didn't leave. You took her. These accusations are slanderous and hurtful. I've always tried to help the women who work for me, provide them opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. You hurt them. Danny's voice cut through Vincent's speech, thin and shaky, but growing stronger with each word. You hurt Miss Anna. I saw you. The church went absolutely silent. Vincent's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Then the smile returned, tinged now with pity. The poor child. Iris, have you been filling his head with these fantasies? He's so young, so impressionable. I saw, Danny said louder. In the basement. You had your hands on her neck. She was crying. Then she stopped moving. There was blood. This is absurd. I remember her dress, blue with white flowers. I remember her hair, dark and long. I remember you dragging her to the back room. Danny's voice cracked, but he kept going. I was 6 years old and I hid behind the barrels and I watched you kill her. The crowd erupted in whispers. Vincent stood, his face flushing dark red. This is a coached testimony from a traumatized child being manipulated by unstable women with grudges. I've never. You killed Anna Reeves, Maeve said, standing. Just like you killed my sister Caroline. Just like you've hurt or killed dozens of women over the years. And we have proof. Nate stepped forward, pulled documents from his coat. Dr. Harrison's records. Years of treating women injured by Vincent Ashford, then helping him cover it up with false mental health evaluations. It's all documented: dates, initials, descriptions of injuries, payments received. Harrison went white. Those are confidential medical records. You had no right. You had no right to help a predator terrorize vulnerable women, Nate shot back. Vincent's lawyer jumped up. These documents were obtained illegally and are therefore inadmissible in any court. This entire display is a desperate attempt by disturbed individuals to destroy my client's reputation through slander and stolen property. Federal warrants are being prepared right now, Nate said. Marshal Theodore Cross in Helena has these documents and is coordinating raids on Harrison's office and all of Vincent's properties. In 3 days, federal marshals will be here to arrest everyone involved in this trafficking operation. The church dissolved into chaos. People shouting questions, some defending Vincent, others demanding answers. Vincent's enforcers moved toward the front, hands going to weapons beneath their coats. Enough, Reverend Matthew's voice boomed over the tumult. This is a house of God. There will be no violence here. Then control your congregation, Reverend, Vincent said, his pleasant mask completely gone now. Because these people are spreading vicious lies that I will not tolerate. Are they lies? The Reverend's gaze was steady. Because that boy's testimony was very specific. And I've heard whispers for years about women disappearing, about things that didn't add up. I chose not to listen because it was easier not to see, but I'm listening now. You're listening to a child who hasn't spoken in 3 years suddenly finding his voice to make wild accusations, to a woman documented as mentally unstable, to a rancher who's been unbalanced since his wife's death. Vincent's voice rose. I'm a pillar of this community. I've donated to your church, Reverend. I've employed half the people in this room. And this is how I'm repaid. You employed them and you hurt them, Iris said, stepping forward. She unwrapped the scarf from her neck, revealing the faded bruises. These are your fingerprints, your marks. You choked me until I passed out because I refused your demands. Then you threatened to take my son if I told anyone. She's lying. I'm not. Iris's voice rang clear. And I'm not the only one. One by one, women in the congregation stood up. A young woman near the back. He touched me inappropriately when I worked at the Golden Flame. When I complained, I was fired. An older woman. My daughter worked there. She came home crying, wouldn't say why. She killed herself 3 months later. Another, he offered me work, then said the pay included special favors. When I refused, I couldn't find employment anywhere in town. He'd blacklisted me. 5 women, 7, 10. Each with a story of harassment, assault, intimidation. Each one Vincent had thought was too afraid or too ashamed to speak. Vincent's face went from red to pale. This is a coordinated attack. They've been coached, paid off by Bridger to destroy me. Nobody paid me, said a woman Nate recognized as the mayor's sister. Nobody coached me. I'm speaking up because I'm tired of pretending I don't know what you are. We all know, another woman said. We've all heard the stories, seen the women who disappeared, watched you operate with impunity because you have money and connections. But maybe if we all speak up together, you can't silence us all. The church was splitting, some people rising to leave, unwilling to be part of this confrontation. Others standing in support of the women testifying. Vincent's enforcers looked uncertain, outnumbered and surrounded by an increasingly hostile crowd. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway. "I have a story too." Everyone turned. A woman stood there, thin and scarred, her face showing the ravages of hard living, but her eyes fierce. Nate didn't recognize her, but Iris gasped. Clara Bennett." "Hello, Iris." The woman walked down the aisle, moving with the careful control of someone managing pain. "I thought I'd never see you again. Thought Vincent would have. Well, glad I was wrong." "Clara worked for Vincent longer than anyone," Iris said. "I thought we all thought that I was dead, nearly was, multiple times." Clara stopped in front of Vincent, and the look she gave him was pure poison. "I was his favorite, his special girl, the one he trusted to help him manage the others, to keep them in line, to make sure nobody talked." Vincent's expression was murderous. "Clara, you don't want to do this." "I really do. See, I was exactly what you made me: broken, dependent, willing to do anything to survive, including hurt other women. I helped you terrorize them, helped you move them between properties, even helped you dispose of the ones who wouldn't cooperate." The church was utterly silent now. "Anna Reeves, I helped you wrap her body, helped you carry her to the wagon, helped you bury her in the woods 10 miles north of here." Clara's voice was steady, factual. "Caroline Sullivan, I was there when you beat her so badly she couldn't walk. When you sold her to that trafficking ring heading to Denver. I saw the money change hands." "You're lying," Vincent said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I have names, dates, locations. I kept records because I knew someday you'd decide I wasn't useful anymore, and I wanted insurance." Clara pulled papers from her dress. "Everything, every woman you hurt, every crime you committed, every official you bribed. I documented all of it." "Why now?" Maeve asked. "Why not come forward before?" "Because I was a coward. Because I was complicit. Because speaking up meant admitting what I'd become." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "But then I heard about Iris escaping, about Danny finding his voice, about people finally standing up. And I thought maybe I could do one decent thing with what's left of my miserable life." She handed the papers to Reverend Matthews. "Give these to the federal marshal. Use them to bury this monster." Vincent lunged at Clara with a roar of rage, but Nate intercepted him, catching his arm and twisting it behind his back. Vincent's enforcers moved forward, but stopped when they saw the crowd, dozens of people, the men and women, both stepping between them and their employer. "It's over, Vincent," Nate said quietly. "Your protection is gone. Your secrets are exposed. In 3 days, federal marshals will be here, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life." "You can't prove anything," Vincent snarled. "Testimony from unreliable witnesses, stolen documents, the word of a confessed accomplice. No jury will convict me. I have the best lawyers money can buy." "Then let's find out," said a new voice. Marshal Theodore Cross stood in the doorway with 4 deputies, all armed, all looking grimly professional. "Federal Marshal Cross," he said, showing his badge. "I got here early. Heard there was going to be interesting testimony this morning. Thought I'd witness it myself." He nodded to Nate. "Good thing, too. Now I've got multiple eyewitnesses to your threats and attempted assault. I want my lawyer." "You'll get one after I arrest you for trafficking, murder, assault, conspiracy, and about a dozen other federal crimes." Cross gestured to his deputies. "Vincent Ashford, you're under arrest. Dr. Harrison, you too. Anyone else involved in this operation might want to speak up now before we start digging." Vincent's lawyer stood. "I was retained legally for representation. I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. Save it for your own trial." Cross approached Vincent with handcuffs. "You have the right to." Vincent jerked away from Nate and lunged not at the marshals but at Danny. The boy was standing with Iris and Maeve, his small face showing exhaustion and relief. Vincent grabbed him around the throat, pulled him close, and in one smooth motion drew a derringer from his vest and pressed it to Danny's head. "Nobody moves," Vincent said, his voice deadly, claiming, "I walk out to here with the bomber. I paint these nice church walls with his brain." The room froze. Iris made a sound like a wounded animal. Nate's hand went to his pistol, but didn't draw. Couldn't risk it with that gun against Danny's skull. "You pull that trigger," Marshal Cross said evenly, "and you die in this church. My deputies will cut you down before the boy hits the floor." "Maybe, but he'll still be dead. Is that what you want? This child's death on your conscience?" Vincent was backing toward a side door, dragging Danny with him. All I want is safe passage out of town. Once I'm clear, I'll release the boy unharmed. We both know that's a lie, Nate said. Probably, but it's the only offer you're getting. Vincent reached the door, fumbled it open one-handed. Try to follow me and the boy dies. Try to shoot me and the boy dies. Your only option is to let me. Danny bit down hard on Vincent's hand. Vincent yelped and his grip loosened just enough for Danny to twist free and drop to the floor. In that instant of distraction, three things happened. Simultaneously, Nate drew and fired his bullet, taking Vincent in the shoulder. Marshall Cross's deputy fired, hitting Vincent in the leg. And Iris threw herself between Vincent and Danny, shielding her son with her own body. Vincent went down hard, the derringer falling from his hand. He tried to reach for it, but Nate kicked it away and pressed his boot to Vincent's throat. Move and I'll crush your windpipe, Nate said softly. I've wanted to kill you since the moment I saw what you did to Iris. Give me a reason. Vincent stared up at him, blood spreading across his expensive suit, and for the first time genuine fear showed in his eyes. Marshall Cross pulled Nate back. We got him. Stand down. Nate stepped away reluctantly while the deputies secured Vincent in chains. Dr. Harrison had already surrendered, sitting on a pew with his head in his hands. Two of Vincent's enforcers had fled. The third was being arrested as an accessory. Iris was on the floor with Danny holding him so tight it looked painful, both of them crying. Nate knelt beside them. Did he hurt? No, he's okay. Iris couldn't finish, just held her son and sobbed with relief. Danny looked up at Nate with red-rimmed eyes. I spoke, I told. You did. You were so brave. You saved everyone. Nate touched the boy's shoulder gently. Your mother's proud of you. I'm proud of you. Vincent, he can't hurt us anymore. No, he's going to prison for the rest of his life. You're safe now, both of you. As the marshals led Vincent Ashford out of the church in chains, the crowd parted in silence. No one spoke. No one cheered. They just watched as the man who'd controlled their town through fear and money was reduced to a bleeding, broken criminal being hauled away by federal law. Reverend Matthews stood at the front of the church and said quietly, "Let us pray for the victims, for justice, and for the courage to never again look away when evil operates in our midst." Jenna. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks like a slow-motion avalanche. Vincent's trial was held in Helena, out of reach of his local influence. The testimony took 3 days, Iris, Danny, Maeve, Clara, and a dozen other women all telling their stories in open court. Dr. Harrison offered a deal in exchange for cooperation, provided documentation of every woman Vincent had hurt, every bribe he'd paid, every crime he'd committed. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: 7 murders, 23 assaults, trafficking across state lines, conspiracy, bribery of public officials. Sentencing came a week later. The judge, a stern woman who'd made her career fighting corruption, looked down at Vincent with contempt. You used your wealth and influence to prey on the vulnerable, she said. You created a system of terror that allowed you to operate with impunity for years. You corrupted officials, destroyed lives, and showed no remorse even when confronted with your crimes. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court will not. Vincent was led away in chains. He didn't look at the gallery where his victims sat, didn't acknowledge their presence, just stared straight ahead with the blank expression of someone whose world had collapsed entirely. Dr. Harrison received 15 years. Vincent's enforcers got various sentences. His lawyer, who'd genuinely not known about the trafficking, lost his license to practice, but avoided criminal charges. The Golden Flame Saloon was seized by federal authorities and sold at auction. The proceeds went to a victims fund Clara helped establish for providing support for women escaping abuse. And slowly, carefully, survivors began coming forward from across the territory. Women who'd been trafficked, who'd escaped, who'd been too afraid to speak before. The network Vincent had been part of was larger than anyone suspected. Dozens of men involved hundreds of victims. Marshall Cross expanded his investigation, coordinated with other territories, began dismantling the whole operation piece by piece. It'll take years, he told Nate during one of his visits to Thunder Creek. But we're going to tear it down completely. You started something, Bridger. You and Iris and that brave boy of hers. We just did what needed doing. Most people don't. Most people see evil and look away because confronting it is hard and dangerous. You looked straight at it and said no more down. That matters more than you know. 6 months after Vincent's sentencing, Nate stood in his kitchen watching Iris teach Danny how to make pie crust. The boy's hands were covered in flour, his face showing concentration, and something Nate had never seen in those first desperate weeks: joy. Danny talked now, still quiet, still careful with his words, but he spoke. Told stories about the animals he'd carved, asked questions about ranching, read aloud from the books Nate bought him in town. His voice was soft but growing stronger every day, like a muscle that had atrophied and was slowly rebuilding. Iris had changed too. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. She still had nightmare. Sometimes Nate would hear her wake gasping in the small hours. But they were less frequent now, and when they came, she didn't face them alone. The arrangement had evolved naturally. What started as employer and employee, protector and protected, had become something else. Not romantic, both of them were too damaged for that kind of vulnerability yet. But family in the way that mattered, people who chose each other, who showed up day after day, who built something solid from the wreckage of their pasts. Nate had legally adopted Danny 3 months ago. The paperwork was simple. Iris retained full parental rights, but Nate was now officially the boy's guardian as well. It meant Danny had two parents instead of one, meant he'd inherit the ranch someday, meant he belonged somewhere permanently. The boy had cried when the judge signed the papers. Happy tears this time. "Mr. Nate," Danny said now, pulling Nate from his thoughts. The boy still called him that, hadn't graduated to just Nate or anything more familiar. "Is the crust supposed to be this sticky? Add a bit more flour, just a pinch you want it to hold together but not get tough." Danny added flour with careful precision. Iris watched with a small smile, then caught Nate's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded. They did this sometimes, these small acknowledgments of gratitude for the life they'd built. Neither of them took it for granted, this safety, this normalcy. A knock at the door interrupted the domestic scene. Nate opened it to find Maeve Sullivan on the porch, looking travel-worn, but lighter somehow than she had 6 months ago. "Maeve, wasn't expecting you." "I was in the area, visiting my sister's grave. Thought I'd stop by." She came inside, accepted the coffee Iris poured. "I have news. They found her." "Found who?" "Caroline, my sister. She was alive. Held in a property outside Denver for 2 years before being moved to Salt Lake. One of the men from Vincent's network gave up the locations in exchange for a lighter sentence. Federal marshals raided the properties last week." Iris's hand flew to her mouth. "She's alive." "Barely. What they did to her." Maeve's voice broke. "But she's alive. She's getting treatment, starting to heal. And she's talking, testifying against the men who held her. She's going to help tear down the rest of this network." "That's wonderful," Iris said, genuine joy in her voice. "It's because of you. All of you. If you hadn't spoken up, if you hadn't stopped, Vincent Caroline would still be there. So would dozens of others." Maeve looked at Danny. "That includes you, brave boy. You saved my sister's life by finding your voice." Danny ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. They talked for an hour about the ongoing prosecutions, about the women slowly rebuilding their lives, about the changes happening across the territory as people started taking trafficking seriously. Then Maeve stood to leave. "One more thing," she said at the door. "There's someone who wants to meet you. The woman who was going to testify to your wife about Vincent's operation, the source she was protecting." Nate went very still. "Catherine's source. She's been in hiding for 4 years, too afraid to come forward. But after Vincent's conviction, she reached out to Marshall Cross, asked if she could speak to you, explain what happened." "Who is she?" "Her name is Elizabeth Winters. She was Vincent's bookkeeper. She kept records of everything, the bribes, the trafficking routes, the buyers, the officials on his payroll. She gave it all to Catherine, but then Vincent found out she was the leak. He tried to kill her. Made it look like suicide. Elizabeth survived, but went into hiding, assumed he'd killed Catherine to silence her. Catherine had died protecting her source, had kept Elizabeth's name secret, even facing death. "When can I meet her?" "Tomorrow in Helena. Marshall Cross is protecting her until she testifies at the other trials." "I'll be there." The next day, Nate rode to Helena alone. Elizabeth Winters met him in a safe house under martial protection, a thin woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Bridger, I've wanted to meet you for 4 years, to tell you how sorry I am." "For what?" "Your wife died because of me, because I gave her information that made her a target. I've lived with that guilt every day since." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Catherine knew the risks. She chose to investigate anyway because she believed some things were worth risking everything for. You didn't kill her. Vincent Ashford did, and now he's paying for it. She was remarkable, brave and smart and absolutely determined to stop Vincent. When I approached her with the records, she didn't hesitate, just asked how she could help." Elizabeth pulled out a leather journal. "This was hers. She left it with me for safekeeping. I think she'd want you to have it." Nate opened the journal with shaking hands. Catherine's handwriting filled the pages, notes from her investigation, names of victims, patterns she'd identified. And on the last page, a letter addressed to him. "My dearest Nathaniel, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. It means I didn't make it back from Helena, didn't get to tell you in person what I've discovered. I know you'll be angry that I didn't tell you everything, that I kept secrets and took risks you would have forbidden. But I couldn't let this continue. Couldn't watch more women disappear while I did nothing. Vincent Ashford is a monster. He's connected to an organization that traffics women across territorial lines. I have evidence now, real evidence that can bring him down. I'm meeting Marshall Cross in 2 days to turn it all over. If I don't make it, if Vincent realizes what I know and stops me, I need you to promise me something. Don't let this destroy you. Don't let grief turn you into someone who just exists instead of lives. Don't let my death be meaningless. Finish what I started. Find the women who are missing. Expose Vincent and everyone like him. Make sure their victims get justice. And then when it's done, find a way to be happy again. Fall in love again. Build the family we dreamed of, even if it's not with me. Promise me, Nathaniel. Promise me you'll live. All my love, Catherine." Nate read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Then he carefully closed the journal and looked at Elizabeth. "She asked me to finish it, to find the missing women and get them justice. And you did. Vincent's in prison. The network is being dismantled. Women are coming home." Elizabeth's voice was gentle. "Catherine would be proud of what you've accomplished. I didn't do it alone. Iris and Danny Maeve, Clara, we all did it together. That's how it works. One person can start something, but change takes a community." Elizabeth paused. "What will you do now?" Nate thought about Thunder Creek Ranch, about Iris teaching Danny to make pie, about the family they were building from broken pieces, about Catherine's final wish that he find a way to be happy again. "I'm going to live," he said. "That's what she wanted. That's what I'm going to do." The 1-year anniversary of Vincent's arrest fell on a clear autumn day that reminded Nate of the morning Iris and Danny had first appeared on his porch. The town of Missoula had organized a memorial service for the victims, the women who'd been killed, the ones who'd survived, the families torn apart. Nate attended with Iris and Danny, joining a crowd of several hundred people gathered at the cemetery. A monument had been erected, a simple stone, with the names of the confirmed dead carved into granite. 12 names, 12 women whose lives had been stolen by Vincent Ashford's greed and cruelty. Anna Reeves. Caroline Sullivan struck through with a note, "Found alive." And near the bottom, Catherine Bridger. Nate stood before his wife's name, Iris on one side and Danny on the other. He'd visited her grave countless times over the past 4 years, but this was the first time he felt like he could actually say goodbye. "I finished it," he said quietly. "Found the missing women, got them justice, stopped the men who hurt them. It's done." A breeze rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Nate felt something that might have been Catherine's presence. Approval, release, permission to move forward. Iris took his hand. Danny took the other. They stood together like that, while Reverend Matthew spoke about justice and healing, about communities coming together to protect the vulnerable, about hope after darkness. When the service ended, people came up to thank them, survivors who'd found the courage to speak because Iris had spoken first, families reunited with missing loved ones, officials who'd reformed their practices because they couldn't ignore the truth anymore. You changed things, one woman said to Iris. My daughter works at the new women's shelter now. She helps other survivors escape bad situations. She does that because you showed her it was possible to fight back. Iris smiled and Nate saw in her face the transformation that had occurred over the past year. Not erasing the trauma that would always be part of her, but growing around it, learning to carry it without being crushed by the weight. As they walked back toward the wagon, Danny suddenly spoke up. Mr. Nate, can I ask you something? Of course. Your wife, Catherine, was she brave like Mama? Nate considered the question. Yes, very brave. She stood up to powerful men who were doing terrible things, even though it was dangerous, even though it cost her life. Do you think Danny hesitated. Do you think she'd be happy about us being a family? The question hit Nate square in the chest. He knelt down to Danny's level, looked the boy in the eyes. I think she'd be very happy. Catherine wanted me to keep living after she was gone. Wanted me to build something good from the sadness. You and your mama, you're the best thing that's happened to me in 4 years. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning that wasn't just anger or grief. You gave me family again. Danny threw his arms around Nate's neck in a fierce hug. I'm glad we found you. Me too, son. Me too. 2 years after Vincent Ashford's conviction, Thunder Creek Ranch had transformed into something Catherine would have loved. The main house hummed with life. Iris had taken over not just the kitchen, but the household management, organizing the ranch finances with the same meticulous care she'd once used to survive. Danny, now 11, worked alongside Nate, daily learning to handle horses, mend fences, manage the small herd of cattle they'd rebuilt. They'd hired 2 ranch hands, both men Nate trusted, both aware of the ranch's history and committed to maintaining a safe environment. They'd also taken in a young woman named Sarah, who'd escaped a similar situation to Iris's, giving her work and shelter while she healed. The network of survivors had grown. Clara Bennett, serving a reduced sentence for her cooperation, corresponded regularly with Iris, working on her own healing while helping prosecutors with ongoing cases. Maeve Sullivan had started an advocacy organization pushing for stronger laws against trafficking. Her sister Caroline, though deeply scarred, had testified at 6 trials and helped convict 24 men. Marshall Cross still visited periodically, updating them on the investigation's progress. 37 arrests across 4 territories. The trafficking network systematically dismantled. New laws passed. Training for law enforcement on recognizing and stopping human trafficking. You started something bigger than you know, Cross told them during his last visit. The work you did here, the courage you showed it, inspired changes across the whole territory. But for Nate, the most important change was the one happening right in front of him every day. Danny, no longer silent, had become almost talkative, asking endless questions about ranching, reading everything he could get his hands on, planning for a future that stretched years ahead. He still had nightmares, occasionally still flinched at sudden loud noises. But he was healing, growing. Iris had started painting. Nate had bought her supplies on a whim, and she'd discovered a talent for capturing the Montana landscape in watercolors. Her paintings decorated the ranch house, now mountains and meadows and horses, bright splashes of color that pushed back against the darkness of her past. And Nate himself had finally truly begun to live again instead of just existing. One evening in late spring, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Danny was in the barn finishing evening chores. Sarah had gone to town for supplies. It was just Nate and Iris, the comfortable silence that came from 2 people who'd been through hell together and survived. I've been thinking, Iris said quietly, about the future. What about it? Danny's going to grow up eventually. Become a man, maybe run this ranch, or maybe do something else entirely. Sarah will heal and move on to her own life, and we'll be... She paused. I don't know what we'll be. Nate considered his words carefully. We'll be family, same as we are now. That doesn't change just because circumstances change. Is that all we are, family? The question hung in the air between them. In 2 years, they'd never discussed the nature of their relationship beyond the practical. Never addressed the fact that sometimes Nate caught himself watching Iris with something more than fraternal affection. Never acknowledged the moments when their hands touched and lingered half a second too long. I don't know, Nate admitted. I loved Catherine, still do in a way. She'll always be part of me. I know, and I'm not asking you to replace her or forget her. I'm just... Iris struggled for words. I'm saying that maybe we could be more than just people who share a house and raise a child together. Maybe we could be people who choose each other not just out of necessity, but because we want to. Nate was quiet for a long moment. You deserve better than someone still half in love with a ghost. You deserve better than someone who's still processing trauma and might never be whole. Iris turned to face him. But maybe we don't need to be perfect. Maybe we just need to be honest about what we feel and what we want. What do you want? I want to stop being afraid all the time. I want to build something real instead of just surviving. I want Danny to see that love doesn't have to be violent or controlling, that it can be gentle and safe and chosen. She paused. And I want to choose you if you'll let me. Nate reached out, took her hand. I'm a difficult man, stubborn. I have nightmares about the river, and I probably always will. I'll never stop missing Catherine. Never stop wishing I could have saved her. I have nightmares too, about basements and hands around my throat. About losing Danny. About Vincent somehow getting free and coming back. Iris squeezed his hand. We're both broken. But maybe broken people can build something strong together. Maybe they can. He kissed her, then gentle and careful and full of question. She kissed him back, and it was nothing like passion or desperation. It was promise. It was choice. It was two survivors deciding that healing could include opening their hearts again, even knowing the risk. When they pulled apart, Danny was standing in the barn doorway, watching them with a grin splitting his face. About time, the boy called out. I've been waiting 2 years for you two to figure it out. Iris laughed, and the sound was pure and free. Smart Alec. I learned from the best. Danny jogged over and inserted himself between them. So does this mean we're really a family now? Like official? We've always been official, Nate said. Yeah, but now it's better. Now it's chosen. That it is. They sat together watching the last light fade from the sky, three people who'd found each other in darkness and built something luminous from the pieces of their broken pasts. 5 years after Vincent Ashford's arrest, Nathaniel Bridger stood at the river where Catherine had died. He came here once a year now on the anniversary of her death, not to wallow in grief, but to remember, to honor, to acknowledge that loss was part of his story, but not the whole story. Iris stood beside him, her hand in his. They'd been married for 3 years now, a quiet ceremony with just Danny Maeve, Clara Marshall Cross, and a few close friends. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about building on it, about choosing to move forward together. Danny, now 16, had stayed back at the ranch to manage evening chores. The boy had grown into a remarkable young man, still quiet but confident, still thoughtful, but no longer paralyzed by fear. He wanted to study law to become the kind of advocate who protected vulnerable people from predators. She'd be proud of him, Iris said quietly. She'd be proud of all of us. They stood in silence, watching water flow over stones. The river didn't scare Nate anymore. It was just water, just a force of nature that had taken someone he loved but didn't define his whole existence. I used to come here and feel only pain, he said. No, I feel I'm grateful that I had Catherine at all, that she loved me, that her death meant something because we finished what she started. Do you think we really finished it? We finished Vincent's part, but the work continues, other predators, other victims, other battles to fight. That's how it is. We win one fight and another one starts. He looked at Iris. But we keep fighting, because that's what we do, what we promised Catherine and all the others. Iris nodded. They'd both become involved in advocacy work over the years, Nate serving on territorial committees addressing trafficking, Iris working with survivor support organizations. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined, but it was purposeful. It mattered. Ready to go home? Iris asked. Yeah, let's go home. They walked back to the horses together, and as they rode toward Big Thunder Creek Ranch, Nate felt something settle in his chest. Peace wasn't forgetting. Peace wasn't pretending the past hadn't happened. Peace was carrying it all, the grief and the loss and the wane, the darkness and the light, and choosing to keep moving forward anyway. The ranch appeared through the trees, smoke rising from the chimney lights glowing in the windows. Danny would have dinner started. The boy had inherited his mother's talent for cooking. Sarah, now fully healed and working as the ranch foreman, would be finishing up in the barn. The hands would be settling in for the evening. Home, family, future. Not the one Nate had planned, not the one he'd thought he wanted, but the one he'd built from ashes and determination and the courage of broken people choosing to heal together. Vincent Ashford died in prison that same year, killed by another inmate who'd lost his daughter to a trafficking ring. The news reached Nate by telegram, and he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, no closure. Just a distant acknowledgement that a monster was gone from the world. The real victory wasn't Vincent's death. It was the lives that continued despite him. The women who'd survived and rebuilt. The families that had reunited. The laws that had changed. The awareness that had spread. Danny speaking that first word after 3 years of silence. Iris finding her strength and her voice. Nate learning to live instead of just exist. Clara choosing redemption over self-destruction. Maeve fighting for her sister and finding her. Catherine's sacrifice meaning something because her work had been finished. All of it mattered, and all of it was victory. That night, as Nate and Iris lay in bed with moonlight streaming through the window, she asked, "Do you ever regret it, taking us in? All the danger and chaos we brought into your life?" Nate thought about the question seriously. About the violence and fear of the federal investigations and public confrontations, the nights spent worrying whether Iris and Danny would survive. Then he thought about Danny's laughter echoing through the house, about Iris's paintings brightening the walls, about purpose that extended beyond his own grief, about family built from choice instead of blood. "No," he said, "I don't regret it for a second." She kissed him softly. "Good, because I don't either." Outside, an owl called through the darkness. The ranch settled into night quiet, and in the main house at Thunder Creek, 3 survivors slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow they'd wake up safe together and whole, not despite what they'd been through. Because of it, 10 years later, Danny Bridger, 26 years old and freshly appointed as Montana Territory's youngest prosecutor, stood before a courtroom arguing his first major case, a trafficking ring operating out of Helena. In the gallery sat his parents, Nathaniel and Iris Bridger, both graying now but still sharp-eyed and strong. Beside them was his Aunt Maeve, whose advocacy organization had helped identify this particular network. Clara Bennett, paroled after 7 years and now running a shelter for survivors, sat nearby, taking notes to help future victims. And in spirit always was Catherine Bridger, the woman whose courage had started it all. When Danny finished his closing argument and the jury retired to deliberate, he looked back at his family. His mother smiled, her eyes bright with tears. His father nodded once proud. 4 hours later, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Justice, not perfect, not complete, but real and hard-won and meaningful. As they left the courthouse, Iris took Nate's hand. "She'd be proud," she said quietly. "She is," Nate replied. "Wherever she is, I think she's proud of all of us." They walked into the Montana sunset together, this family built from trauma and choice, from darkness and determination, from silence broken and voices raised. And somewhere in the space between memory and hope, Catherine Bridger smiled.